Page 36, Rutabaga rag. I guess it's Rutabaga or Rutabaga or something. I don't know. It's whatever. Starting off with the right hand, I want to point out a few things for you to look out for. Now, I know most of the things I'm pointing out are things you're probably going to see and find and discover on your own, but different people find different things, and I don't know who my audience is, so I'm trying to point out everything I can think of that might throw you in case you miss it. I'm not assuming that you won't see it. I'm just, somebody out there won't see it, so I'm pointing it out for them. Take a look on page 36. Right at the beginning, the first line. Now this first line is like an introduction. Lots of pieces have introductions, no big deal. You're starting out in the first measure with the right hand, second measure with the left hand, and then let the third measure you cross over and play that with the right hand again. And then the very last note on the first line is played with the left hand. So be aware of that. And the second line on page 36, watch the fingering. You're starting out with third finger on B, but on the next measure, it's fourth finger on B. You moved around a little bit. Not a problem, you got a quarter rest to do it in. Just be aware of it. It's not third finger on B every time. Happens again in the next line, it'll happen. Just be careful of the fingering. On page 36 in the last line, it's the second ending, it's the first measure of the last line. Watch the fingering. You have the second finger on the F sharp, and then one on the D, 2, 1. In the second measure, they're suggesting a 5 on the D, and then a 1 on the F sharp, and a 4 on the C sharp. I find that a little cumbersome myself. I don't see anything wrong with just leaving the second finger on the F sharp and using the fifth finger for the top notes. So if you want to try that, try that. In the last measure on page 36, they're suggesting a 1-5, 1-5, probably another 1-5, and going on to 37, another 1-5. It's okay. I would suggest for the last measure, page 36, is a 1-5, then a 1-4 for the F sharp, then a 1-5. It's just a style of fingering that when you have a black note like that, the fourth note comes in really handy on black notes, if it's feasible. Third line down is the second and third measure. The first ending measures, I don't really know what they're thinking with the fingering here. I don't understand it. The way they've got it, the fifth finger would play the C. And now they want the third finger to play the F sharp. That doesn't work because I'm using the third finger to play the A. So it could be an error. Now I can play the first measure of the first ending. That C, I could use fourth finger, but it still doesn't help because I third finger on the F sharp, doesn't work. I could put the thumb on the A and cross over and get it. It's cumbersome and there's no point in that. So in my opinion, play both of those F sharps with the second finger. You can try the thumb on the first one if you want. I don't like a thumb on a black note when I don't have to. It works okay. So in my opinion, for the first ending there, you could use fifth finger on the C. Just reach down with the second finger to get the F sharp. Take a look at the fourth line there on page 37 in the right hand. Now, you have been using little finger on the C in this passage. Well, that's fine if your fingers are up to it. Across this line, you can use fifth finger on C. It's working those weak fingers, so that's actually a nice thing. However, it's unnecessary. Starting with the second ending, there is the last measure on the third line. You could just as easily change over and use the fourth finger on C. And that works just fine. Now when you get to the fourth line, the next to the last measure, depending on how you fingered it before that, you're either going to have index finger or thumb on the G. And they're saying a second finger on the triplet D. When a piece is relatively quick, and this is relatively quick, having those three notes like that repeated is a bit of a danger. You'll probably miss one. So I'm recommending that you change the fingering on that triplet to a 3-2-1. That's very common fingering in piano, and that's what I recommend. Then you use third finger on the E flat and then a 2 on the D. At the bottom of page 37, last measure, last note, you have that little grace note, the F sharp to the G. The F sharp in this case is played very, very quickly, and you could actually play them at the same time and just release the F sharp. The G is a staccato, you're not going to hold it down, so it's just going to be very quick. If you play them exactly at the same time, it's a different effect. A lot of grace notes, in this style of music, a lot of these grace notes can be played with the little note at the same time as the big note, and then you just release the little note. It comes across okay. In this case, the big note is a staccato. So if you tried that now, it doesn't come across as a grace note. It comes across as a chord. So you're going to have to play the F sharp just a hair before the G. Just a hair, not a lot. For the left hand, page 36, second line, notice the whole note, G. You got to hold the whole note down for the whole measure. So while you're playing those notes above it, you're holding the whole note down. So it's 1, 2, rest, 2. The whole note stays down. 1, 2, rest, 2. Now they've indicated pedaling for the one measure here and then the one measure over on page 37 where the same thing happens. I don't know why. In my mind, the pedal is unnecessary, and I'm going to leave it out. I'm a firm believer, don't use pedal unless you have to. And in this case, I don't see why that's important. I understand, I guess, to a point why they're doing the pedal. You see, there's a note at the beginning, in between the stabs, there's a note of semi-detached touched. Well, that makes the notes all slightly detached. Not staccato, but not legato either. It's in between. But this measure is legato, it's smooth. It's a contrast to the others. And I guess they're using pedal then to bring out that contrast. I don't see the point. I don't need pedal to bring it out. I can do it with the fingers. So you use pedal if you want, I'm leaving it out. I don't need it. And while I'm talking about that semi-detached briefly, it's if I play, take the first line again. If I play it legato, phrased, connected. If I play it staccato, and what I want is a little in between. They're just detached. Supposedly it gives it a bouncy feeling, and we'll give it a bouncy feeling by speeding it up because it's in cut time. But you have to speed it up for that. When you're first learning it, forget the bounce. Get the rhythm and the notes correct. Back to the left hand. In the third line down on page 36, the first measure is your normal one chord in G major. But be careful on the second measure. That's not a one chord anymore. That is a D and an F. They changed it. It's actually a 5/7 or a G7 chord. They just left out the B. So be aware that that happens again elsewhere. So, you know, at first glance, you just say, okay, it's just another one chord, right? And this is where they trick you. It's not. Over on page 37, third line down, It's the second measure, back to that first ending again. Well, do the first measure of that line first. The third line down, first measure. You're here in the left hand. I recommend using the fourth finger on the A for the next measure, and then a 2-1, and then a 5. The hand doesn't move as far. It moves, but not as far. If you use the fifth finger on that A, you're moving a lot further. It's unnecessary. You can use fourth finger. When you're first learning it, it's important to be accurate with what you're doing. After you know it, then you can start fiddling around a bit. So, like at the bottom of page 36, well, even before then, third line, last measure on page 36, it's the first ending. In the left hand, you have a half note and a quarter note. They come up on beat 3. So in the right hand, when you play the G, the left hand comes up. And the first measure of the last line on page 36 is the same thing. The left hand comes up on beat 3. So when you play the E in the right hand, the left hand comes up. Now, 2 measures later, this is the next to last measure on page 36. The left hand's already down. The left hand comes up when the right hand plays the B. So be sure, we want to hear the rest in the left hand. They're there for a reason, and we need to hear them. So try and be accurate with your left hand when you're lifting that up. This is, as I said, written in 2/2 time, but we're going to take it really, really slow. If you were counting it in 2/2 time, you'd go 1, 2, 1, 2. Well, then quarter notes would be 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Then eighth notes have to be a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. 1 E and for you got to have 4 notes, per beat. Well, let's slow it down a little bit because the purpose here is for us to get the right notes. You can speed it up on your own. I put the metronome on 70, hoping that is not too fast for you at first. It goes a lot faster than this. It's beating quarter notes, though. See, so it's like the first measure there with the metronome would be this, which is way too slow for the piece, but hopefully for our purposes it'll be okay. I need you to have time to hear the notes to make sure you're playing the same note I am. So I'm going to give us 4 quarter note counts and then we'll start. So the right hand is here, left hand's here. If you're using pedal, put your foot on the pedal. 1, 2, ready, go. believe this piece would sound more or less like this.